Hey guys, so today I'm going to talk about what this build is, and we're going to go get it tuned. So this is the build that I've been working on for the last year and 3 months or so. Essentially, if you guys remember the last build on this car, this is my white 91 SS. Had the 25D heads and the forged bottom end 22T and the TDO516G running on the Haltech. Made about 300 wheel horsepower and torque, and we were at the limit of the air-to-water intercooler. Well, we didn't really show it on YouTube, but I got about 1,500 miles on it, and I noticed that the RPM would drop whenever I put the clutch in. I looked into it and figured out that I had a thrust bearing failure from the crank, so I had crank walk in and out here. Not good, so I basically immediately pulled it apart, which is very sad, but pulled it apart. Found out the thrust bearing failed. Never really found out why. It could have been a clutch alignment thing because I was running the 06 plus WRX clutch with, at that time, I had a 2003 Legacy 5-speed, and the fork looked like it could have been interfering in the bell housing. That could have contributed to it. It was also a cheap eBay clutch, XTD, which I've used many times, but I was just trying to think of any reason that it possibly could have failed prematurely like that. And that sucks because it was also one of the last Phase 1 crankshafts, brand new from the dealer in the country. They're no longer available. So what I ended up doing is I took the block back to the machine shop, Portland Bearing Services, and I had them machine the block. I brought it, first of all, with an EJ22G crankshaft, which has the same stroke, but has the number 5 thrust position. So the thrust bearing goes from the center all the way to the back. And I had to machine the block to take that thrust bearing, which also opens me up in the future to use, say, an EJ257 crankshaft for stroking, which I did not want to do. I'm a fan of short stroke engines that rev high. That's just my preference, but it opens that up as a possibility in the future. Second thing I did after basically the block was built was my friend Brian in Canada, Brian Karen, he's in the Legacy pages. He was kind enough to buy and part out a 98 STI for me. That was a rust bucket imported into Canada. He boxed up and mailed me all the 20K stuff except for the block. So I got 98 20K, not that you can really see them, but 98 20K heads, had them fully rebuilt at the same machine shop, basically just completely gone through. These are the STI version in that era. They had longer valve springs, hollow intake valves, sodium-filled exhaust valves, just really, really good heads. They have the hottest cams you can get factory from any Subaru. They're basically the best of the best when it comes to stock heads. So should be ideal for making some power. And then next I started setting up the 20K intake manifold, which is kind of interesting because it has this pipe that runs the IAC over here. I did end up using just like an Outback idle air control valve because I did not get the IAC with manifold, but that worked just fine. This is just a check valve to keep boost from blowing through it because I don't trust the little butterfly valve things that fail all the time, and this can hold a lot more boost. So, and then literally from Amazon found a EJ20K turbo inlet, because I quickly figured out that this vacuum port here, which I'm not even using, and this whole nub here just completely interfered with the 90-degree inlet TDO5 that I was using, where the intake comes straight up. So it was either heavily modify this manifold for a turbo that I'll probably end up upgrading from eventually, or just go ahead and upgrade now. So I got this guy in there, which is a Kinagawa ball bearing 18G. I went with the 8cm hot side, so bigger hot side, and I believe a 60 AR compressor housing, which compressor housing size doesn't really matter, but it looks pretty freaking fat. So that turbo hypothetically should be good for like 330 wheel on the dyno that I'm going to, which is known for reading lower than other dynos. So and being ball bearing, it should spool faster, or I don't know, relatively the same having the front mount. So that was the other thing I did, was I got my hands on a Mishimoto J-line intercooler. You can kind of see it there. I trimmed the bumper to basically fit around it. It's a little short. It's only like, I think, 7.5 inches tall, but it's 3.75 inches thick. It's almost 4 inches thick. I don't know if you can actually see that. Probably not. And if you've been following my Instagram, I detailed this entire project, how I made the intercooler piping, all that stuff. So if you're interested to see that, unfortunately I didn't film a video, but you can kind of see my process step by step how I did it. But I essentially took the crash support with the bumper off, and it's double layered. There's like a beam here and a beam here, and I just cut it so it was only the top beam, and then bolted the intercooler directly to it, directly through, and that actually took out a good portion of the mounts where the crash support goes into the frame rail and bolts in right there. So then I had to plate that back in while keeping enough room for the intercooler piping, and then basically just cut a hole underneath the headlight on each side where it just runs through. And I can probably insert some pictures in here of what I'm talking about so you can see. So that covers basically the engine setup, turbo setup, front mount. Other thing that I did was I have the Tile 38mm MVS wastegate already. I believe it's MVS or MVR. I think it's MVS. And I really wanted to recirculate it back into the downpipe. I've had the external wastegate for years, and it is very loud, and it's cool at first, but after years and years of looking around for cops every time you hit the gas, it gets a little old. So it's very hard to show. Again, we can probably insert pictures, but let's see if I can go underneath here. You can see it right there a little bit. So got that recirculated in, and then added a high flow catalytic converter right there, which is, more just because there's kind of no reason to not have a catalytic converter on this car. It's the high flow ones are not too expensive. They don't really affect performance at the power level I'm at, and it's just a little better for the environment. It smells better out of the exhaust pipe. I won't get that fucking black smoke out of the back every time I do a pull. So just another nice touch. And then I also got an IEG AOS going in here, which is huge. I've wanted one of these for years, but they're just, all this stuff has kind of been previously out of my price range, and this time I just said, fuck it, I want all the cool stuff. So, or not necessarily all the cool stuff, but all the stuff that just makes it nicer in general. Ended up using a factory STI bypass valve, which has the crush mod where someone crushed the diaphragm in to actually hold more boost, because normally they'll open up at about 22 pounds. And hypothetically, with it being crushed right here and the spring having more tension, it should hold more, but don't really know. I did totally redo the fuel system for more power too. I got the Radium made right here in Oregon. Got the Radium fuel line kit, which is the non-parallel kit. So essentially, fuel comes out of here. I had to adapt the size, which I found out later, the quick disconnects, someone can correct me on this, but the quick disconnects may just fit directly on this port here, which I could have done. This would have been cleaner, but I have it size adapted here to 3/8 line. This is the radium line, so that goes under the manifold, gets heat shielded, of course, and then goes into the fuel rail there, goes around, and then goes up and over. I kept it mostly on top up here, just honestly for ease of working on it. Like, it's just so much easier to work on. Yeah, goes in there, goes to the back, and then the regulator right there. So, and then there's a return right off the regulator that comes up and returns right there. So, pretty simple, but the reason for doing the fuel lines is to do the top feed adapter kit, which is, let me see if I can, let me grab a light. Alright, so down in there, you can see the radium top feed adapter kit. So with the adapter kit, it's brackets that bolt these rails directly to the manifold, and little adapters for the injectors themselves. So I actually have Injector Dynamics 1050X injectors, which are like just the go-to for Subarus right now. They're big enough to make some power, but they're known for reliability. They're not too expensive. So got some nice big injectors in there. I had the D-Twerk 740 side feeds before, and they got the job done, but side feeds are known for not being reliable, and they're basically just decapped STI 550s, which is not ideal. So this should be able to get better gas mileage, run better at lower RPM, being top feed, be more reliable, and make more power. Another thing I did was I put in a D-Twerks 300 or DW300 fuel pump. It is a 340 liter per hour pump, and then I hardwired that straight to the battery. So this wire, the fuse right there, basically goes underneath the back seat. I snaked it basically through the clutch cable hole where all my wiring goes, and then it goes in the trim here, follows all along, goes out to the back of the seat, and then goes over to the fuel pump. And it has basically a fat relay that is triggered by the normal fuel pump power wire that then turns that relay on and connects it straight to the battery with 12 gauge wire. So big fat wire, big fat ground. And then I bought the, I believe it was, radium bulkhead studs that go through the fuel pump hanger. Again, we can insert pictures of this too. So the wiring goes through the hanger all the way to the pump itself, so there's no dinky wiring inside the hanger to worry about. So that allows you to get a lot more out of a fuel pump. If you have full voltage with fat wiring, not melting anything, you can run it at 100% versus melting the factory wiring. So, yeah. So, next big change was I finally got a 6-speed. So, I got an 06 STI 6-speed from a nice guy who rolled his car doing autocross. Actually drifted into a curb and rolled down a hill doing autocross. But really nice guy, helped me get the transmission set up for relatively cheap. So it's an 06 6-speed. I went with the whole Cobb shifter setup. OEM knob, I really like this red OEM knob with the leather. But the short shifter and the reverse lockout are all Cobb. I managed to squeeze the boot on here, so because I love the look of the Slinky, and I always wanted a 6-speed with a Slinky. So 06 STI transmission, I went with an Exetti Stage 1 STI clutch, which should be able to hold the power I'm going to be making, but still drive nice. We'll see if it holds it. I really hope it does. But and then I probably can't even show you, honestly. It's underneath there and the car's low. But automatic drive shaft going to a 2002 to 2005 WRX rear diff, which is still an R160. but is a viscous limited slip, and it's the 3.545 ratio, or 3.455, whatever. The 355 ratio is what people call it, which is correct for this transmission, which is this transmission, I believe, is 3.9 final drive, but it has the 1.1 split at the center diff, so you actually need a different ratio rear diff. So this is the right ratio rear diff, it's just not the R180, so it's not as strong as a straight up STI transmission, or straight up STI rear differential and axles, but it's the right ratio, it's limited slip. I should be able to have fun with it still. So for the front axles, because basically I stayed 5x100, so I didn't want to change all my knuckles and stuff. I didn't get that stuff with the transmission, so to keep the same front spindles, what I did was used 2004, I believe, Impreza sedan front axles. So not WRX, not STI. The sedans are wide body, which I have the GD front subframe with the aluminum control arms that are wider, so I needed the wide body Impreza front axles to be the right length. So those axles actually fit the 6-speed on the inside, are the right length for the lower control arm, and have the right spline count for the hubs here, which are just factory first-gen hubs. So pretty cool that that worked out. I haven't gotten OEM ones, they're just like O'Reilly's crappy ones, so they'll probably fail the boots and stuff, but I'll find an OEM set eventually. For the rear axles, for the WRX limited slip diff, it was really interesting. I actually used 2.5 RS, like 98 to 2000 2.5 RS rear axles. They are the right spline count to fit the diff. Not that you can really see them, but they're the right spline count to fit the differential, and they're the right spline count for the car, and they're the right length. So 98 2.5 RS rear axles. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. I got some new tires, some Continental DWS06 Pluses on my old Koenigs, which I didn't put the speed lines back on, partly because they're on my other car, but also because they don't fit Brembos. So those will be going on eventually. I gotta gather up some more parts because Brembo parts are expensive, but yeah, they will be going on. So you can kind of imagine the Brembos being behind there. One other thing that I did was I deleted the ABS. So that's a huge thing that I've been wanting to do for a long time. Basically the ABS pump was here, and I basically bought 2 of these T's here, and bought tools to bend brake line, bought tools to flare the end of the brake line, and bought these T's and just bent them up how I needed them. So these are the rear 2 calipers and the rear port going to the master cylinder. These are the front 2 calipers and the front port. Got them bolted in place. It took a lot of tries of doing the flares to get them to not leak. It was a huge pain in the ass, but I mean, the benefits speak for themselves, like how much room I have here. So also the power steering pump setup kind of changed. Ended up getting 2015 STI power steering lines, at least the pressure. This is from an 03, I believe, 03 or 04 Outback. Low pressure line and reservoir. And that hose goes up over to here, to the pump. The 2015 STI line worked out really nice for avoiding the turbo inlet, which is the reason for going to it. And then I've got it all heat shielded down there by the turbo. Got all the stuff nicely heat shielded. So yeah, and I also had to use the 20K throttle body to avoid modifying the manifold to accept something else. So I had to make my own bracket here for the throttle cable, not too bad. Got it P-clipped right there. Got a P-clip right there. Yeah, I don't know, I was just trying to go the extra mile to just make everything as nice as possible, avoid vibrations, stuff like bolting down this charge pipe to the manifold with the rubber bushing so it has some amount of room or amount to move, but cannot foul with the battery positive, which I do not want. But yeah, I think that about covers it. I'm sure there's other stuff I'm forgetting. If you have any questions, you can go to my Instagram. You can message me on Instagram. You can message me on Facebook Messenger. But if you have any questions about details of how I did a particular thing, like installing the JDM coolant expansion tank or whatever, yeah, just feel free to message me or ask questions. But coming up on my appointment time, so I gotta get down to Surgeline and get this thing on the dyno and see what it makes.
Well, made it down to Surgeline. Just waiting my turn for dyno time. Passed the pre-dyno inspection, no problem. So they boost leak tested it. All my charge piping is good and everything like that. The only thing was the exhaust was revving on the rear axle, so they put some extended hangers on, and that's all fixed. So just waiting my turn. So he's just gotten through all the wastegate tuning, so did totally fine. He went up to 8,000 RPM at 14 pounds, and everything's going fine. Holding oil pressure. We're dropping the red line back to 7,500, and I think he's going to start up and boost. So. Alright, so we're back at the garage. We got the car back apart. Didn't have time to film an end at the dyno session, just because they were closing and a bunch of weird shit happened. So basically what happened was we were doing one last power run, just to make sure that everything was the same in the tune, and he was, basically just quality checking his work. So he was running it one last time for the day, and it made about 50 horsepower and about 50 torque less at the same boost pressure and the same air fuel. Immediately did not know what happened, did some testing on the dyno, ended up pulling the car off the dyno, smoke testing it real quick, which they have a really good smoke tester where they can pressurize the whole intake system. So pressurized the intake, found that the intake gaskets actually blew, which is, I'm looking at it now, it's probably my fault, because this 20K manifold, I sanded on a glass tabletop where I laid sheets of sandpaper down on a perfectly smooth glass tabletop and sanded the ports totally smooth. But I think they actually have a very slight cant to them on the cylinder head side, so it wasn't actually crimping the gasket down here. So what we did to fix that was got another set of gaskets, actually two more sets of gaskets, and my 8mm Phalonic spacers. Phalonic spacers. I always have a hard time with that word. And that allowed a little bit more squish in the gasket, as well as used just a really, really tiny film of the right stuff on it, just to help only this outer edge seal. Not enough to actually squeeze it in and hurt anything, but just like that, because it did seal initially when we first got the pre-dyno done. They pressurized it and it sealed. It just blew out with boost pressure. So just adding a little bit of insurance that this is going to continue to seal. Took it back to the dyno, ran it again, and had the exact same result, other than he had to adjust the air fuel a little bit, and it was down from making almost 340 wheel to making about 270, and then by the time he corrected the air fuel, it was making like 280, but clearly something's hurt. So took it back home again, compression tested the whole thing, all the compression's even. There's a little bit of oil in the cylinders, which may be concerning, but not really thinking that that's related, because the compression is all even. We were going to do a leak down, but before we went through the trouble to do a leak down test, I just brought home my little Amazon borescope. This is like I think it was like $12 on Amazon or something stupid cheap. But it just plugs into your phone, and it's a little camera with a light on it, and you can stick it in places. It's like 16 feet long, and I can just take screenshots on my phone. So we can show you guys some screenshots of what we found right now. We can hopefully put them on the screen so you can see. But basically, after I pulled the downpipe, ended up pulling the O2 bung in the header, because I have an 07 STI header and it has the O2 bung in there that I have plugged. So I pulled that out, stuck the camera up into the up pipe, and the flex joint in the up pipe actually imploded. So I do have the slight problem where I made this whole wastegate recirc, which I guess I didn't get to show you guys earlier, but now you can see it very clearly. So I made this all to work with that up pipe placement of the wastegate, and so I really want to avoid having to remake all this and possibly junk the downpipe, or just cut it off and patch it and then restart, and I really don't want to do that. So what we might end up doing is pulling the up pipe off and just only replacing this flex joint in here. Let's see. I don't know if you can actually see that flex joint right there. So if we just pull it out and use this engine, which this is another project that you can see on Preston's Instagram, but use this engine as a jig to basically cut out and replace that flex joint. Either get rid of it or replace it with another one. I haven't decided yet, but that might be what we end up doing. So not the best ending to the video, but also not the worst. The engine seems healthy, the turbo seems okay, so yeah. I guess that's gonna be it. Sorry we can't end this video with doing pulls, but we'll have to get some video of it on the street for the next video, just so you guys can see it.